The StockIQ application. It's a browser-based application. You type in a URL, name and a password, and you will land on this dashboard screen. It gives very high-level information about the state of the inventory. So in this case, we have $30 million worth of inventory across 2,500 items. You can also see how many items we've stocked out, how much excess, how much dead stock, and how many items are considered slow. And these are configurable definitions. In the middle, you can see what the portfolio is made up in terms of current inventory position and usage pattern. And then at the bottom, we'll show you over time, what has the on-hand balance been relative to what the target inventory is, as well as what it is relative to the min and the max that we'd like to see you with in terms of overall inventory. Aside from the dashboard, we really rely on management by exception, or alerts that can be configured for each user, depending on what's important and what tolerances are important. And I won't go through all 20, I'll just highlight 2 of them for you. One of them is something that's reviewed on a monthly basis, where we look at last month's actual sales relative to the forecast. And what we're trying to ferret out there is large spikes, things that might goof up the forecasting algorithm in the future, that maybe we can mitigate by going in and looking at the data and reducing or removing certain data points. The other one I'd highlight for you is projected available. The software is always looking out into the future to try and understand what you'll have on hand at any given point for each item. And if it's such that we think you will be in excess, we will tell you about that. And conversely, if we think you will stock out within lead time, we will tell you that. So hopefully you can find another vendor, get it from another location, maybe expedite the order, or be able to tell customer service that there's a good chance that we'll be out of stock if the forecast holds. Now for some of the blocking and tackling, some of the forecasting and taking that forecast and turning it into supply orders. And so this is our forecast manager, and the green here represents the historical sales or usage of a given item at a given warehouse location, either across all customers, or this could be by customer, depending on the orientation of your business. And from Business Central, we're getting the actual sales order transactions and by month, and you can sort those. And so you can see if there's a really large one that popped up over here that maybe we want to address. Maybe that was a pipeline fill of promotion. Maybe we want to reduce or eliminate that data point so it doesn't foul up the forecast in the future. You can see how the demand landed on each day of the month. And then you can also see by customer how much in the blue that customer has contributed to the whole over the last 3 years. Next, we want to look at the historical sales in whole, in aggregate, and we want to say, well, what's the trend? Are the sales going up? Are they going down? Are they staying flat? We want to look at seasonality to see if there are certain times of the year that an item sells better or sells worse, and we want to take that into consideration. And then lastly, we incorporate what's termed a statistical model, forecasting method, or an algorithm, all synonymous terms. And I always say that if you don't know anything else about this item, this forecast is a pretty good one to go with. But if you, for certain items, maybe high volume items, if you query the sales folks and they say, well, we think we're going to sell this much, or if you have a budget forecast, for instance, and you want to keep that in mind as you're creating the forecast, we can bring in additional reference lines for you. And then lastly, the important line is what's known as the operational or the consensus forecast. And this is ultimately what is sent to the replenishment engine to suggest purchase orders, work orders, or transfer orders, depending on where the supply is coming from. And you own this forecast, so it's possible for you to make adjustments. So as a quick for instance, if you thought the last quarter of the year, October, November, December, was going to be a little bit higher than it has been in the past because of some intelligence that you've gotten or gleaned from the industry, we can make that change. And so you'll see October, November, and December have increased in their sales, or increased in their forecast, and we will pass those numbers along to be replenished to. Parting comment here is that this forecast, of course, will not always be correct. And so we will also calculate for you safety stock or buffer stock. If the forecast isn't right, vendors delivered late, you want to be able to have inventory to cushion that blow. And we can calculate that for you. And it incorporates a component of demand, a component of forecast accuracy, a component of lead time, and then a service level orientation. So in this case, I think we had it set at 99%. So 99 times out of 100, we want this product in stock when the customer is asking for it. And in this case, the system is suggesting 584 units for us to accomplish that. If we were to take the forecast and the safety stock and we were to move into the replenishment side of the application, we put on our buying hat. This is where the buyers would come to create orders. And you'll notice that there are three types of orders here. There are vendors that we would use to create purchase orders. There are warehouses, which we would use to create transfer orders within your own network. And then there is a manufacturing entity that we would use to create work orders, if that's appropriate. So I'm going to choose vendor 31. It's suggesting that we buy 15 items out of a possible 152 that we ever buy from them. And the total is close to 14,500 if we follow the suggestion exactly. So if I move on to the next step in the process to create this purchase order, we'll get a variety of information in here, including the item, the site, the supplier name, a description of the product, our current on-hand balance, the lead time, and then finally the quantity that is being suggested. And all those numbers are editable. So if you know something the software doesn't or you're not comfortable with that, you can certainly make changes if you like. Additionally, if you need to round up or size your order to something else, for instance, you need a vendor minimum with units or weight or cubes or containers or certain days of supply, we can target to any of those values. You can put a cap on it to say, hey, I want you to target this, but don't bring in any item that has greater than 6 months or 180 days worth of supply, and we can help you with that. Next step, once you're happy with the order, is you move, and we will do about a dozen checks for you to make sure you're not breaking any rules that have been set. We will highlight that this will be to 2 locations, 8 lines to one, 7 lines to another, and then there is a small workflow in here if you want us to send this order immediately back to Business Central versus keeping it in StockIQ until you can get a second set of eyeballs on it before it moves into Business Central. And then lastly, a summary of the order, an opportunity to type in some notes. And the moment I hit place order, we will push these 2 purchase orders with 8 lines and 7 lines respectively back into Business Central. So they are ready to go. They just need to be executed within Business Central and communicated with the vendor. So that's as easy it is to create an order. And the last thing I'd highlight for you, especially these days when we've had such goofy lead times with COVID and then supply chain issues and so on and so forth, we do have the ability to track lead times and provide suggestions for you. So for instance, if I look at a given item at a given site from a particular vendor, in this case, we have 7 receipts over the last year. And right now we're using 15 days as a planning lead time. And we're getting that from Business Central. That's where 15 is coming from. But given the 7 receipts, StockIQ believes that the lead time is actually 31 days. And so we can actually simply just report that to you so you can see it in a spreadsheet and make some comparisons and determine what to do. Or we can take 31 days and feed it back into StockIQ so that the purchases are offset by 31 days and the safety stock incorporates a 31-day lead time instead of a 15-day lead time. And there are some rules down here about sample size and duration and how much we are allowed to change it. So you have more control over it overall. And then these numbers roll up into a vendor scorecard. And so all of the individual lead times you can then see at a vendor level, how many of them have been early, how many have been on time, late, how complete were they? And this information is great when it's time for a vendor review or vendor negotiations, especially when it comes to price, because you can reference their performance over the last year.